permit or make possible this temporary elevation of the consciousness to participation in the mystery of the soul drama. This is your ecstasy of religion. This is your mystical experience, carried in a pumpkin coach that has no real existence, limited by time, must be back before the midnight hour or the whole illusion vanishes. This entire situation represents the story of man's internal imagery, leading him to temporary identity or to temporary experience of the presence of this divine state. This is then the extension of consciousness described for the sage and the saint and the seer. The time when he is lifted up for the moment into the glorious mystery of God, or the glorious mystery of happiness, of peace, of love, of faith, of serenity, and of beauty. As a result of the peculiar pact of magic itself, however, imagination cannot accomplish the final end. And we have another interesting simile brought in, and that, of course, is the glass slipper. In departing in haste from this ceremonial experience, Cinderella leaves behind her an identifying object, something that pertains and belongs only to her, and which cannot be made to fit into any other person or being in the world. By this means, by this circumstance, the ultimate discovery of Cinderella by the prince will be achieved. Now here we come again to another phase of the religious fable, which we might always bear in mind. In this type of story, we have two factors working one against the other, or in a certain sense, in sympathy. One is the ascending need of the soul itself, which is represented by Cinderella and her magical experience. But man, according to the ancient wisdom teaching, not only must reach a point of saving himself, but he must also receive, according to the Christian dispensation, a certain saving grace, a certain power. He must not only perform certain actions, but heaven must move to meet him. Therefore, even in the Chinese, there's the saying, when man moves, heaven moves. So that the two polarities work with each other. It is not possible for the princess now, or Cinderella, to advance her own cause beyond a certain point. She has the mystical experience, meets the prince, becomes aware of his existence, and then must leave, going back again to the Latin story of Cupid and Psyche. Now it becomes the prince who can no longer live without the princess. Therefore, we have the positive or animus power of the soul moving into objectivity. We find, therefore, that this union must be achieved as the result of a powerful action on the part of the animus also. So it is now dependent upon the positive pole of the soul to search through the psychic integration and discover the true counterpart of itself in the psycho-emotional field of man. Thus, by using the slipper, which simply becomes like the golden bow of Virgil, the symbol of identification, how to discover or recognize, the positive power of the soul must also go forth to meet the negative and to discover the mysterious lost princess in the humble situation of Cinderella. It must therefore again emphasize the humility of mysticism, the simple naturalness of the human relationships in life, and that the divine in man is also searching for its own humanity. That the spiritual energy of the animus desires union with the anima once it has discovered its nature. Once it has experienced it, it draws upon itself the powers of the soul. It therefore goes forth as a positive agent seeking its own soul. Thus we have in man now a double personality problem. We have man instinctively, as Cinderella, dreaming of release, not daring to hope for what was going to happen, but by magic being brought into this magnificent circumstance. Then we have the positive polarity of the soul as consciousness, now rededicated to the conscious discovery and final union of itself with its own psychic polarity. Thus we have the two great purposes which dominate life. First, the ascent of man as a personality toward principle, and secondly, the descent of eternal principle within man toward union with objectivity, thus occurring in the actual creation of the total soul, which is the union of ascending experience with descending illumination. The final union, therefore, takes place when the mortal being rising up provides means for the release or expression of the divine being through itself, and these meeting in a middle distance result in the hermetic marriage or the final union of the soul as psychic integration. Thus, in the middle ground between spirit and matter, between Cinderella and the prince, the mysterious psychic union takes place, which proves or provides the ground for the forever after, living in peace and happiness. The forever after is almost identical then with the concept of the nirvana of India or the heaven state of Western man. It is the foreverness resulting from the final binding of all separate things, the final union of the psychic poles in man, the ascent of the mortal and the descent of the immortal into common union as psychic life. And to the Egyptian, the soul was the immortal mortal and the mortal immortal. It was the being between heaven and earth, the Greek hero. And the attainment of this level above that of ordinary mortality, that was the essential search of the golden age of Greek learning. It was also the end of alchemy, the marriage of the sun and moon, the ultimate union of the internal resources of man, the descending divine power of wisdom and the ascending human power of experience meeting as understanding, or meeting as total sufficiency. That this legend should exist and should travel through countless peoples is therefore obviously archetypal. Man will accept it as no less. In his insecurity, he is searching for security, and postulates it always in a being that is secure, the Overself. His search, therefore, is for the Oversoul of Emerson, the total psychic sufficiency. This is nearly always a prince, or a king, or a ruler, or someone superbly wise, because it must always be the king of the self. It always represents the unquestioned authority of consciousness over all of its attributes and all of the conditions which it engenders. It is a ruler, because it is the only fit ruler of the self. It is always the administrator, and it is always as animus, wonderful, handsome, strong, the fulfillment of all desire, even as when it is anima, it is always the beautiful maiden who must be rescued. So our stories always relate either to the positive pole of consciousness rescuing the lesser, or the negative pole of consciousness through the virtue of its own patience, through its dedication, through its understanding, through the victory of faith over fear, gradually deserving the intercession of the spiritual power. The anima must deserve. The animus must be deserved, because it represents causal consciousness which must be earned, and that which earns it must fulfill its way the psychic nature represented by Cinderella must live the doctrine in order to know it. But that which lives the doctrine invokes it, and the psychic prince comes to the rescue of the individual who has kept its rules and obeyed its laws and deserved its presence. Thus the romance of the two parts of the soul becomes the only romance in which the human being as idealist can detect no flaw, can perceive no limitation, and cannot view with misgiving of any kind. It is that romance of which all material relations are symbolical. For it is through physical and human associations, rightly understood and rightly lived, that man becomes capable of these overtones of emotion and consciousness by which he can mature his own soul. Therefore, all physical relationships are symbolical of the divine relationships of the two parts of man's soul, with the attendant members of the caste, all of the other factors, the mind, the ambition, the intuition, all these personified become the persons in the great psychic drama within man. But this drama is always a love story, for it always represents ultimately man's love for God and good, and his ultimate resolution to attain union with the divine. Thus it becomes a great story in which man's fear of God, or his respect for God, gradually changes into his unqualified love of God, and his resolve and determination to be worthy to be loved by God. These form the instinctive patterns of primitive people, and they have come down to us in the fairy tale and the legend, and their utility and their practical insight is as great today as it was long, long ago. And time is up, so that's it.